Today we're going to talk all about retirement and retirement stories and real life scenarios that people are facing every day when it comes to retirement. And I think a lot of these stories are going to confirm what I've been saying for a little while now, which is that retirement was just kind of this blip on the radar of human history. You know, you go back 100 years ago, there was no such thing as retirement. People didn't retire. Maybe if you were ultra wealthy, you did. But the average working Joe worked until they dropped dead. And after World War II, we kind of entered this golden era of retirement and people getting pensions and being able to just live a nice life in retirement, not have to worry about money and not lift a finger. Well, those days are coming to an end very quickly for just about everyone. And this first story is a perfect example of this. I'm 72 years old and I rely only on Social Security, and I have $77,000 in credit card debt, and this person's to the point where they're thinking about selling their house just so they can pay off their debt. Nobody probably thinks they're ever going to find themselves in this bad of shape when they are 72 years old and retired. Now, this guy has medical conditions that limits his mobility. He has no retirement savings, so he's living only on Social Security alone, and he's supplementing the income with credit cards. But now he's racked up $77,000 in credit card debt, and he's facing some hard financial choices. And obviously, when you keep going down this road, it pretty much only leads to one place, which is disaster in the end, unfortunately, because you can't keep charging credit cards up forever. Eventually, the bank will shut you off. So this guy's stuck in this vicious cycle where after making his minimum credit card payments every month, he has only a little bit of money left over from his Social Security check. So then he uses the credit cards to cover the gap. So you're constantly using the credit cards to pay for more and more of your lifestyle as you are paying most of your income just to cover the interest. Sounds like a familiar situation. Oh yeah, the United States government, we're doing that now too. That's a discussion for a separate video. Now, one ace in the hole that this guy has is that his house is totally paid off, and he has about $350,000 worth of equity in the home. And he wants to have his adult children inherit the house, but he doesn't know if it makes sense to sell this home and pay off the debt and downsize, or to just ignore the debt for his remaining years and just forget about it. Well, that's probably not a good idea. His children are going to get stuck with it. It's going to come out of that house no matter what at some point. And this guy is far from alone, because according to a recent survey from AARP, about half of Americans who are 50 years old and older carry credit card debt from month to month, along with 42% of Americans between age 65 to 74. So more and more senior citizens and retirees are relying on credit cards to get by, just like people who are still working. The survey also notes that about half of older adults who have credit card debt feel financially insecure, and of those people in the group, more than half have credit card balances of $5,000 or more, and about half of them say their balance has grown from the previous year, because debt grows exponentially, especially when you're looking at, 23, 25% interest rates on these cards right now. Some of them are even higher than that. And the top reasons that these older adults cite for having all this credit card debt is the increase in cost of living, increase in everyday expenses, as well as the increased cost of vehicle and housing costs. In other words, inflation, guys, which is a problem for everyone. This isn't just hitting older folks, this is hitting everybody who has to spend money. And according to this man, he says he's already cut down his expenses to as little as possible, and most of his money is spent on healthcare and paying back his credit card debt. And he's in a cycle where if he doesn't take out new debt, that means not buying food or not paying for his medical care. So it's literally survival at this point of why he needs to keep using the credit cards. So should he just ignore the debt? Well, that's probably not going to be a practical solution, as I said, because if he does and he just stops making payments or just keeps paying the minimum, eventually he's going to reach his limit. He's going to max out his cards, and he's also not going to be able to obtain new credit from any other lender once they see how much debt he's carrying and he's not paying it off. And with this much debt racked up, he could actually get sued by one of his creditors and be forced to sell his house to pay off the debt anyways. Now, there are some places where you can't be sued and you can't lose your house to a creditor. Like in Florida, for example, if you have a homestead exemption on your property, you can't lose your house because you didn't pay your credit card bills. And there might be some other places in the country that have similar laws, but in general, this is something that creditors are going to try to do if they know that they can get away with that. So if he doesn't sell his house, one of the only other options he could probably do is a reverse mortgage, and I did a whole video on that, on why it's probably not a good idea, because like I mentioned in that video, if you're somebody who actually needs a reverse mortgage, then it's probably not for you. But some people might be forced to do it who are in a dire situation like this, and selling the house is not an option. So this guy's kind of been between a rock and a hard spot. He doesn't have many good options. He can either do the reverse mortgage, he can sell the house now, and that's basically it. But notice that both options lead to a situation where you're going to have to sell the house or tap into the equity of the house in order to pay off this debt. And whether it's him doing that or his adult children that do it once they inherit the house, either way, someone's going to have to do it in order to cover that debt. And one thing I do want to bring up here that is in the defense of people saying that renting is a waste of money and that you should buy a house and pay it off. Well, if this guy would have been a renter, he would be completely screwed right now and might even be homeless or living with one of his children, because his house is the only real asset that he has that he can tap into now that he's kind of broke in retirement. But I don't want this to be the number one reason why people go out and buy a house, especially in today's environment, because so many people have to stretch themselves so thin right now to be able to buy the house, and the expenses to own the house and maintain it are so high, then you might not actually be able to save anything for retirement. And then you could end up right in the same situation as this guy. Like, okay, yeah, maybe you have a paid off house in retirement, but you literally have nothing else, and you're going to be forced to tap into that house for retirement. So what's the difference if you don't save for retirement and you own a house and have to tap into the house later, or you do save for retirement and you remain a renter and save all the difference? This kind of leads you to the same place in the end. Now here's another retirement story of somebody who is retired and they regret waiting until they were 70 years old for Social Security, and this is why. They say, now that I'm 72, I get the bigger check, but it came at a cost that I didn't see before. So this guy and his wife put off travel and some bucket list dreams in their 60s, thinking they'd have more money and time later on. But the most unfortunate thing is, this man's wife passed away before they could enjoy those years together. And he says, if I could do it over, I'd have claimed earlier and used those payments to make memories while we still could. I mean, that is just tragic, guys. I mean, I kind of feel the same way. Like if I was in retirement position right now, or in the future if Social Security still exists, I feel like I would just take it pretty much as soon as it's available. It might not be as much money, but it is extra money that you can get right now, and you never know how long you're going to live. So if you get less money each month, but you live for an extra 30 or 40 years, you're going to get more than if you wait an extra 10 years, and then you only live an extra 10 years from there. And another thing this guy didn't expect is how much healthcare and daily expenses went up faster than he had planned for, and having those extra years of Social Security income would have helped. Like actually getting that smaller check, but more consistently throughout the years, not waiting until later on to collect a slightly bigger check each month. So having the income sooner can actually be a massive advantage if you're somebody who kind of needs that extra money in retirement. And then there's this hidden reason of why he wishes he would have claimed it earlier, which is the mental toll that it takes on you, something I never thought of, maybe a lot of you have never thought of either, about should I wait or should I claim now kind of thing. You know, this constant push and pull in your mind, this constant dilemma of what to do. He says the pressure to make the right move was more draining than I realized, plus the stress of second guessing every year, should I wait, should I claim, was more draining than I realized. And the uncertainty and constant worry about making the right decision made it hard to relax and enjoy retirement, which I think is another argument of why to take it sooner, because it's just done. Now you're getting the check at 62, but of course it does depend on your position in life and your income, because if you earn too much money, you'll be in a position where you're going to see a lot of those benefits disappear anyways. So it kind of really depends on if you're truly retired and if you're still working or not. That's going to probably make the biggest influence on whether you should take it early or not. So this guy's advice, if you're somebody who's on the fence, he says this: don't just follow the wait as long as possible rule blindly. Think about your health, think about your spouse, and what you want to do with your time. Sometimes a smaller check earlier is worth it if it means living your life now and not someday. And man, I just love that, I really do, because I try to live my life like that right now, even before I'm retired. And that's why I'm here in California. Does it cost me extra to come here every year? Do I have to pay more than if I were to just stay in Florida all year? Yeah. But guess what? I'm living my life today and not someday. And if something were to happen to me tomorrow, I can die knowing that I did what I wanted to do with my life. The experts and all the financial planners can give you the best advice when it comes to trying to maximize your returns and maximize your income in retirement, but they don't know your life, and only you know what matters most to you and your family. And for this guy, waiting until 70 made sense on paper, but in reality it cost him time, experiences, and peace of mind that he can never get back. And I just think this is one of the most powerful retirement lessons and stories I've ever heard. I think this is an amazing story, and I'm so glad that I found this and read this and could share it here. Now let's kind of jump into the numbers and the retirement woes here for a minute, because a lot of people are just simply unprepared for retirement in terms of having the money. That's why I think most people will never see retirement or know what that is. Within the next 20 years, it's going to be an obsolete term practically. Even right now today, the average savings needed to retire is $967,000, basically a million, but the median retirement savings is only $144,000, guys. It is not even close. People only have about 10%, 15% of what they're supposed to have saved in order to actually retire in a healthy position. So if that's the stats right now, when things are supposed to be good still, imagine what it's going to be like in the next 20 or 30 years. No one's going to have anything. People are already struggling right now just to pay the bills, just to be able to keep up with the cost of living as it is. How on earth are most people supposed to set anything aside for retirement unless you sacrifice your entire way of living today, which also doesn't make a lot of sense either. In fact, 40% of retirees right now rely only on Social Security, which only averages you about $20,000 to $24,000 a year, just like this guy we talked about at the beginning of the video. And the reason why retirement is so hard is inflation is the number one reason. But besides that, we had the rise of the 401k back in the 1970s that replaced traditional pensions, which shifted all the burden of saving for retirement over to the worker and away from the employer. And many older Americans were never taught how to save or invest properly. And then, of course, in retirement, you have soaring healthcare costs, and that becomes your biggest expense unless you still have a house payment or rent or mortgage. Even in this story here, the advice from the experts is delay Social Security until age 70 to maximize monthly benefits. Well, if you do that, you might find yourself in the position like the guy we talked about before. Sometimes it's not just about how big the check is. Sometimes it's about how long can I collect the check for. And in retirement, you should still be following basic budgeting things like having a 6-month emergency fund. That's something that you should definitely have. That should be a non-negotiable. Whether you're retired, whether you're still working, it doesn't matter. And if you're somebody who actually is working right now and you have any hope of retirement one day, you need to be cutting your costs and your budget right now while saving aggressively, while avoiding risky investments. That needs to be the formula for investing, and making sure you are continually investing as much as you possibly can to ensure that you at least have a shot at retirement one day. And that's why right now we're in a situation where homelessness for senior citizens is projected to triple by 2030. It's 2025, guys, so it's supposed to triple in the next 5 years. That is not a very promising outlook. And it's to the point where many seniors are now relying on mobile medical services or community support just to survive. And if you become homeless when you're a senior, that's going to shorten up your lifespan even further. And don't forget that as it stands right now, if things keep going in the current trajectory, by 2033, the Social Security Trust Fund is only going to cover about 77% of the promised benefits, and it's probably going to continue to decline from there. A lot of people say, well, they won't cut benefits, they'll just print more money and they'll give you the promised benefit. But then, of course, the problem is inflation is going to be the biggest issue, and you're still only going to be technically receiving 75% of those benefits when you count the reduction in purchasing power from inflation. So either way, you're getting screwed. And one more example of a woman who is living only on Social Security. She's in Santa Fe, New Mexico, only on Social Security, and after her rent payment alone, she only has $200 a month to live on, and she's now looking for work at age 70 years old. And she says, I worked hard all my life and I didn't think it would be like this. So this is where you end up if you don't plan properly for retirement, guys. Unfortunately, this is the end game. But I think the reason that people are so disappointed is because people were kind of sold this dream and this lie of, well, you know, even with just a 401k and hard work, you're going to be able to retire and have the same quality of life as people who got full pensions and never had to lift a finger or worry about money. That's just not going to be the reality for many who are looking to retire in the future. And I know it sucks to be having these promises broken and to not have retirement be a reality in the future. But unfortunately, that's the situation people are facing unless you work really hard while you are still working to make it a reality. And one last thing that we need to talk about is that you can do all of the retirement planning in the world, work with the experts, work with a financial advisor, try to project into the future, try to oversave for retirement. But the reality is nobody really knows how much it's going to cost to retire in the future. You know, we're just working on projections and using past data to try and give people the best idea of where you need to end up in retirement. There's no guarantees here. You know, I did a video a few weeks back talking about some of the data of how much money, the multiples of your income that you should have saved by different ages in your life. And a lot of people I saw in the comments said, well, this is unrealistic. Well, that's what the projections say you need to have if you want to be retired one day, at least retired comfortably and not just living on Social Security. You know, they say that your budget might drop a little bit when you're retired since you won't need work clothes, you won't need to commute to work anymore, you won't have some of those expenses that you have right now. But, for example, healthcare costs are going to go up. That seems to be a common theme from the stories we talked about today. The cost of living is going to go up. The expenses of everything else that you need to buy are going to be much higher in the next 20 or 30 years from now. So how do you predict that? Well, that's just it. You don't. It is impossible to come up with a precise number that any one individual is going to need in retirement. You just don't know. Everybody's working on an educated guess. Really, your best shot is to look at the benchmarks and look at where your financial advisor says you should be at this age and look at, am I on track? Am I ahead of schedule? Am I behind schedule? You know, and really the only way you can kind of foolproof yourself into probably having the best shot at having enough in retirement is to always be ahead of schedule. If they say you need to have, you know, 1.5 million by the time you reach 60, you should have 2 million. You know what I mean? Like, strive to have more than that in order to be able to cover all the unexpected rises in cost of living and all the other things that might happen when you no longer have an income. The reality is all we can do is hope for the best and plan for the worst. And that's true for just about everything in life. And it's no different when it comes to retirement planning, unfortunately. So I hope this helps somebody out there who needed to hear this, who is looking at retiring now or is already retired. And I hope it inspired younger people who are hoping to still have a retirement in the future to get on it and get ahead of the game right now while they still can. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.